Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me. In today's video, we go into the Doom Tower to take on Borgoth, the Scarab King. Now I'm going to show you the easiest strategy that I know for taking him down, regardless of what level your account is. And then we're also going to go up all the way to floor 100 of Doom Tower Hard Mode, so I can show you my best team for defeating the Scarab King quickly and easily at the maximum difficulty. So if you're struggling with the Scarab King at all, this video's got you covered. I hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. Okay, so as always with a Doom Tower boss guide, we're going to start with a description of the fight and the boss's skills. So the Scarab King's first skill is Madness Fog. Now this is an AoE that places a decreased attack debuff and a decreased speed debuff for 2 turns, basically on your whole team. This will place an extra hit on enemies that have no shield buffs. The extra hit places a provoke debuff for 1 turn. Now this is very important. This is something we have to prevent. So shield buffs are going to become very important to our team composition and our strategy. The second skill is Vile Absorption, which also attacks all enemies and places an extra hit on each enemy for each buff on the target. Each extra hit steals 1 random buff from enemies that have no shield buffs and removes 1 random buff from enemies under shield buffs. So if you don't have a shield buff, the boss will steal your buffs and put them on himself, which can be really tricky, especially if you have like an increased defense or a counter attack or a block debuffs. In addition, this will place a True Fear debuff for 1 turn on enemies who have buffs stolen and a Fear buff for 1 turn on enemies who have buffs removed. So you're going to get feared as well. Now that's it for the attacks, but there are several passives that we have to consider. I'm actually going to skip down here to Easy Prey first, because this is the most important. So Easy Prey says that the boss will counterattack when attacked by an enemy that has no shield buff. So literally any time that any one of your champions attacks the boss without a shield buff up, the boss will counterattack. And the boss will counterattack with this A1. Remember that this A1 places a decreased speed, it places an extra hit on enemies that have no shield buffs, and the extra hit will place a provoke. Once that provoke goes up, you're in trouble. There are very few ways to deal with that provoke, because if everybody's provoked, you're not going to have a cleanse. Now, somebody like a Doom Priest who has a cleanse on a passive could maybe manage dealing with that provoke. But remember, you also have a decreased attack debuff and a decreased speed debuff out there. So cleansing the provokes specifically might be tricky. So all strategies for solving Borgoth are going to revolve around shields and preventing that provoke from ever happening, and preventing any counterattacks from happening. Now, if we go back to the passives, there is the Almighty Immunity. We're used to that. But one thing that's important here is that Borgoth is not immune to turn meter decrease or slows. So both of those can play into our strategies. The final passive to pay attention to is Spectral Horror. So the way this works is basically Borgoth has kind of a shield. You don't see it as a shield. It's a purple bar. But you need to destroy Borgoth's max HP in order to reduce this shield. Based on how big the shield is, the boss will take less damage. And you can see that if you destroy the max HP of the boss, you reduce the effectiveness of this shield. So what it means is that the damage received by the boss is decreased by 90% if Borgoth's max HP has been destroyed by less than 10%. So if you've destroyed the boss's max HP by 0, or less than 10%, then this is a 90% damage reduction shield. Now, this doesn't necessarily stop the boss from taking damage, it just makes the fight really long. As you destroy the max HP of the boss, the damage reduction reduces. So once you get to 10%, the damage reduction goes from 90% damage reduction down to 60% damage reduction. And then if you destroy 20% of the max HP, it goes down to 30% damage reduction. And eventually it goes to no damage reduction if you've destroyed 30% of Borgoth's max HP. Now that's pretty tricky. Probably by the time you've destroyed 30% of his max HP, you've killed the boss. But destroying max HP in some way can speed up this fight. And if you don't have a champion that has that ability, you can always put somebody in a destroy set. And we'll talk about that later on. But remember, this is an extra. This just speeds up the fight. This is not necessary for winning the fight. And I would say probably early on in your account, you're going to ignore this completely, and you're just going to go for a team that has all the other components that it needs to survive this fight and turn it into a victory. Okay, so here we are on floor 20 of Doom Tower Normal. This is my noob versus pro account. And What I want to say here is with this strategy, the champions that you bring in don't matter that much because the entire strategy is based on one piece of gear. Now, getting this gear requires a little bit of RNG, but it basically allows you to bring almost any champion into this fight and complete it. So what's this magical piece of gear? Let me show you. Okay, so here is my Stag Knight, and as you can see, he has a special ring here. This is not a typical Bannerlord ring. This is, in fact, a Blood Shield ring. Now, a Blood Shield ring gives the wearer 5%, a shield worth 5% of the damage dealt after attacking. Now, this might seem strange, but when you attack the Scarab King, you get a shield from the Blood Shield ring. Now, before the Scarab King counterattacks, it does a check to see whether or not you have a shield. And this shield gets applied before that check happens. So anybody that has a Blood Shield ring on any hit will get a shield and won't trigger the counterattack from the Scarab King. That's it. That's the whole strategy. I mean, there's a little bit more to it, but basically, if you can get 5 Blood Shield rings, you can put almost any 5 champions in at the lowest levels of Doom Tower. And as long as they're built fast enough, you're probably okay. As long as you have some damage dealers, you're probably okay. It doesn't hurt to have a healer or a cleanser, maybe some turn meter fill. There are all sorts of things you can add to that team to make it more effective. But the key component is, can you get a Blood Shield ring? So if we look at my team is Stag Knight. There's a Blood Shield ring. Coldheart has a Blood Shield ring. Taragi the Frog has a Blood Shield ring. Burngiri has a Blood Shield ring. And even Doom Priest has a Blood Shield ring. Now, if you don't have Blood Shield rings for 5 champions, there are other champions who can put up shields for the team or for themselves. You can also use a shield set to give you a few turns at the beginning of the round to get started. But in general, you're going to need a replenishable shield that goes up every single time. One kind of champion that can be really valuable is a champion that puts up a shield on themselves on their A1. And there are a few of these champions. Now, on this account, I don't have many, but let me go ahead and look. So I'm looking for a shield buff on an A1. So here is Admonitor. Now, Admonitor is an uncommon. He's not a good champion. But if you go to his A1, you'll notice it says, attacks one enemy, places a shield buff on this champion for 1 turn equal to the 10% of the damage inflicted. That's a weird way to phrase that. Should just say equal to 10% of the damage inflicted. So what this means is Admonitor will never trigger the counterattack of the Scarab King as long as he's only using his A1. If he's attacking with another skill, in this case, Admonitor doesn't have a second attack. But if you had a champion like this, you might have to turn off the other skills in the AI. So you could use a champion like this instead of a champion with a Blood Shield ring. But everybody else who doesn't have this kind of skill or isn't covered by a shield from another champion will need a Blood Shield ring. So you can mix and match. But for today, we are going the route of 100% Blood Shield rings on every champion. Okay, so here we are back in Doom Tower. Now, a couple of things to note. One is that if you have any turn meter decrease, that can be helpful. We do have some turn meter decrease. Remember that Coldheart has a 100% turn meter reduction skill. In addition, the slow from Stag Knight can be very good. One thing you want to watch out for is buffs, because the Scarab boss can steal your buffs and use them against you. Now, you can resist that, and that's one of the reasons why I have ally resistance in all battles here as my aura. So let's go ahead and run this. And I don't have this set up with any AI. We'll do that later when the boss gets a little bit harder. So we're just going to click start and let it go full auto. Now, this shouldn't take too long to get to the boss. But if you want, you can, put the AI in there so that you don't get all these buffs and you just use attacks. Because basically, the waves in boss fights tend to be a lot easier than the waves on regular floors. Okay, so here we are at the boss. Now you can see up in the upper left-hand corner, there's that purple bar. That is the shield that we were talking about. That is the damage reduction shield that gets reduced as you destroy max HP. You do not need to do that, but if you could do that, it would speed up the run. Now, one of the things you want to note is that the boss will open with his A2, and this will steal random buffs from the enemies that have no shield buffs. It also removes random buffs from enemies under shield buffs, including the shield buff itself. So typically you don't want to open with buffs. You just want to go ahead and throw maybe some A1s, maybe some debuffs at the boss. So I'm not going to use any buffs until the boss goes and uses that skill. All right, now the boss has gone. And now if we wanted to, we could use some buffs. So here I'm going to put up the increased attack. I don't really care too much about the defensive buffs. I don't need them. So I'm just going to go ahead and attack with Burngiri's A1. Same thing with Taragi. He has a shield, ally protection, reflect damage. We don't care too much about all this stuff. We just want him to use his A1. And in fact, I'm just going to let it full auto here, and we'll see how long it takes. Shouldn't take too long, because at this level, on floor 40 or whatever, no, what floor are we? Floor 20. On floor 20, the boss doesn't have that many stats. And so even without a max HP damage, we're going to take down this boss pretty fast. As you can see, let me just pause for a second. This little symbol here above Stag Knight's head, that's the shield. That's the shield we're getting from the Blood Shield ring. And you can't actually see it. It is so small that it's not actually measurable on the HP bar. It's only 5% of the damage we're doing, and these are all tanky champions who are doing almost no damage. But you can see that the shield never comes off. When Burngiri goes, he reapplies the shield that is coming off simultaneously. So look at Coldheart here. She has a shield, she'll hit, she'll end up with a shield at the end. And that's it. No counterattacks. We don't have to deal with any counterattacks from the boss. Every single hit that we use reapplies the shield. Now you can see here the shield's been removed from everybody because the boss went. But again, as soon as we hit, we get the shield back. And even though we get the shield on the hit without the shield, like we don't have a shield at the start of the turn, but we end up with a shield before the boss actually checks for the shield. And that's all that matters, because no counterattack gets triggered. We do it again. And again, it didn't even matter that Coldheart was provoked, because she uses her A1 and gets a shield. And so that stops the counterattack from happening, and we don't have to worry about the next provoke. And so now everybody's gone and they all have shields again. All right, so let's go back to auto this. We'll let this run through, and I'll meet you on the other end. Okay, so there we are. It wasn't super fast, but it was relatively easy. Like I said, it does help to have some kind of healer on board or some kind of sustain. Even if it were just a leech that you could apply to the boss, and then everybody could heal themselves off of the damage that they dealt, that might be enough to get you through these low levels. And this strategy is going to work all the way up through the highest floor of Doom Tower hard mode that the Scarab King resides in. You're going to be able to use this strategy forever. So start getting your Blood Shield rings right now and building up teams that you can use for the Scarab King. Now that does bring us to the question of where the heck do you get these Blood Shield rings? And really it's any Blood Shield accessories, but you can only get them from winning CVCs. So your clan needs to compete in the clan versus clan tournaments every 2 weeks and win in order to get some Blood Shield rings. The rings that you get are random, so you're going to need to win several CVCs over time. But the good news is you get multiple rings most of the time when you win. And like I said, you can put these on almost any champions that you have. So as long as you have some level 60 champions that have Blood Shield rings, you can probably do the job. You may not even need a team of 5 champions. So don't stress if you don't have 5 Blood Shield rings. I could probably clear the first floor 20 of Doom Tower with just 2 or 3 champions, maybe like Doom Priest and Stag Knight and Coldheart. That might be enough. So go ahead and check to see if you have a few Blood Shield rings. And if you do, you might already have a team available that can beat the Scarab boss. Okay, so now it is time to take on the very toughest Scarab boss of them all. Here we are on floor 100 of hard mode Doom Tower. So now we are on my main account, and as you can see, I have some very good champions here. But the champions are less important than the roles that those champions play. And so I'll just walk you through this team composition so you have an idea of what it is you're looking for to defeat the floor 100 Scarab King. All right, so here we are in the team setup. Now, Lady Kimmy brings an aura of 30% increased speed in Doom Tower. Now, that's really important because the Scarab boss up at floor 100 runs pretty fast. He runs at about 220 or 225 speed. So some of my champions don't run that fast, but with the speed aura, they will all run over that speed. You can see Lady Kimmy is actually running here at 311. My Vizic's at 240. So Newt's actually at 215, but he's going to be fast enough with the aura. Royal Guard, 235. and Syl down at 220. But again, she's going to be fast enough with that speed aura. Now, this team has an added wrinkle compared to the team that we just ran in normal Doom Tower. This one is about turn meter control. So rather than just getting shields and making sure that the boss doesn't counterattack us, we're also going to try to stop the boss from getting any turns at all. This is kind of like Fire Knight, where you want to break the shield and then turn meter control the boss so much that he never gets a turn. This is going to speed up our run considerably. So in this particular case, all 5 of my champions have some turn meter decrease. And in addition, we have 3 different ways to get slows on the boss. So Vizix has an AoE slow on her A2, and she is Void Affinity, so I don't have to worry about weak hits. Royal Guard has a slow on his A3, and then Scylla of Drakes has a slow on her A1. Now, the stat requirements up here at floor 100 are actually pretty tricky, so let's go ahead and take a look at those. Here I am on hellhades.com, and I've used the Raid Stages tool to select this particular floor. You can see Doom Tower Rotation 1, floor 100 hard, and we can just scroll down to the boss, and you can see Borgoth's stats right here. Now here where it says resistance, that is how much resistance the boss has, and the orange number is how much accuracy we need. So we need 355 accuracy. Likewise, if you were trying to resist the boss, you can see you'd also need 355 resist. But in this case, we don't need to resist the boss because we're always going to be covered by our shields, and we're going to turn meter control the boss, so we never have to worry about him actually getting a turn. You can see his speed is 225, so he is faster than a few of my champions. That's where that aura comes in. But I also have a turn meter fill and a speed boost. Those are going to help. So as long as you have one or the other, you're probably going to be okay if you can get above 225 speed for everybody on your team. You do not want the boss getting a turn. So maybe you can do it just by having one champion faster, but that champion has to have a turn meter boost or a turn meter decrease. But you should be running fairly fast once you get to the top of Doom Tower hard. Okay, so once again, everybody has a Blood Shield ring, but we're also going to add this additional layer of the turn meter decrease. Remember, we do have to get through the waves. Now, the most important part of the AI is how you close out round 2 and how you start round 3, which is the boss round. You want all of the necessary skills available when you spawn into the Borgoth fight. So here in round 2, what I like to do is I will control the opener of that round, and then I will shut it off because that's probably the opener of round 3 as well. So you can see here, Lady Kimmy's Spirit Flux is her opener, and this fills the turn meter of allies by 15% and places an increased accuracy and increased speed buff on allies. It also removes a random buff from each enemy, but this is the best opener probably for me. And so I'm going to have her open in round 2 with this and then turn it off. She's not going to use it anymore. Don't use. That means it's going to be available for round 3 when I get to the boss. Now, I'm not going to actually start with that. I'm going to start with the A1 because this also has some turn meter decrease. So I'm actually going to want to decrease the boss's turn meter first. As far as Vizix is concerned, it's the same kind of thing. I want to use the A2, but then have it available against the boss. And then I'm going to open with the A2. I'm shutting off her A3 because the boss can't be provoked, and I don't want her to waste a turn. I would rather have her using her A1. Her A1 reduces the turn meter of the target by 15% for each hit. So that's really important. I basically want her to use this slow one time and then shut it off. And then she's only going to use her A1. Now, Newt's A1 also has turn meter reduction, so I want him to open with it. It's really important that he does not open with his A2. His A2 places a counter attack on him. Now, if that gets stolen by the boss, if the boss gets a turn, he can steal that counter attack. And then it doesn't matter that I have Blood Shield rings. This counterattack would cause the boss to counterattack. So I don't want him to have access to this buff. So I'm not going to use it on the first round or first turn. I'm going to open with the turn meter decrease. Then if Newt wants to use this, remember it does place a decrease attack and a weaken. The weaken is important because that's going to increase the amount of damage the boss takes. Now my Royal Guard is basically doing whatever he wants. I don't really care so much about him, but it's really important to note that he is the one in the destroy set. So he's the one who's going to be peeling off that purple bar and actually allowing the boss to take more damage. And finally, we have Scylla of the Drakes. Scylla of the Drakes in rounds 2 and 3 can basically do whatever she wants. She's primarily there for her A1. Actually, what I should do is I'm going to turn off this A2, which is her AoE stun. She doesn't need that against the boss. So she's just going to use her A1, which will refresh the decreased speed debuffs and also reduce the target's turn meter. Now, we saw that the accuracy that we needed was 355. And as you can see, I should be pretty close to that. Here, Royal Guard has only 350, but he has some accuracy masteries that should get him where he needs to be. Newt's a little bit low, but he's Newt, so who really cares? He just hits hard. Vizix, again, has accuracy masteries, and Lady Kimmy has the accuracy that she needs. So I am really close on the accuracy requirements, but I just have enough accuracy to get this done. All right, so let's go ahead and run it. And remember, again, you have to clear the waves, but with the AI, we've kind of determined that we don't necessarily want to clear the waves too quickly. We want to make sure that second wave gets cleared at the right point, so we have all of our abilities available when we spawn into the Scarab King's room. All right, so we're just going to let this auto, see how we do. I love Scylla the Drakes here for the AoE stun. That can really help. Additionally, we have slows from two different champions, right? Both Vizix and Royal Guard have slows that can hit multiple targets. Royal Guard has a 4 random hitter that can slow, so that's not too bad. Now, as we get into this second round, the second round can be tricky because it's got 3 Duchesses, so you need some way to deal with those Duchesses. You don't want a block debuffs up, you don't want them reviving over and over again. So we have the stun and the provoke here to deal with them. Once we can get the slows on, that's going to help even more. And then our turn meter reduction is going to go to work. So these Duchesses aren't going to get very many turns, if any. And that's basically how we deal with the Duchesses. You can also go with a buff removal champion like Sathalia or Wukong, or somebody that can remove the block debuffs buff that they put up, but it's better to just not let them get a turn. And we're just going to finish this off and then move on. As you can see, the wave did not get a chance to go, and that's another bonus of all of that turn meter decrease. Now here, as we enter the boss's fight, remember the AI was programmed here. We're going to get that slow. We have a slow out already, but this is basically focused on getting slows out and then doing the turn meter decrease. So Vizix will probably double place the slow here. So I could improve the efficiency of this team by, not worrying about all of the slows that everybody has. Now, Newt should use the A1, which hopefully will decrease turn meter if his accuracy lands. Remember, he's a little bit short on accuracy, but he landed all 3 hits. And now we've got the turn meter in a good place. We've got the slow already on the boss. Now we can place the weakens. Now, if we had a decreased defense, that could help. And as you can see, the purple bar is starting to go down just a little bit from Royal Guard. Once it gets down 10%, then the damage will start to ramp up. And then this fight will go relatively quickly for this level of Doom Tower. All right, so go ahead and enjoy the fight, and I will see you when it's over. Okay, so there we go. It wasn't slow at all. You can see 3 minutes and 29 seconds, 103 turns, and that was with my explanations. So yeah, this is basically about a 3.5 minute clear with this particular team. I think I've got 4 fantastic champions for this particular boss, any of which, if you can get a hold of, are very good. Now, Vizix is free to everybody, so is Scylla of the Drakes. Newt was a fusion not too long ago, so many of you may have him. Lady Kimmy here is absolutely phenomenal for this role. But really, all you need is an aura. It could be in all battles. It could be in Doom Tower. If that happens to come on a turn meter filler, that's even better. So somebody even like High Katoon could work here just fine. Finally, the Royal Guard role is really any damage dealer that you like who can hit pretty hard and you have a destroy set for. That's basically it. That's all I need the Royal Guard for. You could bring in a Cold Heart. You could even bring in somebody who maybe had an additional cleanse, or you don't need a second damage dealer here. If you have Newt, Newt's going to get the job done by himself. But then you would probably want Newt in the destroy set, and I think that's a little bit of a waste for him. You'd rather have him in something like Savage. But Royal Guard definitely did some work here. In addition to being the second hardest hitting champion on the squad, he also completely reduced the Scarab boss's shield all the way down to 0. I hope you noticed that, but that just made it that much faster of a run. Okay, so that is it for the Scarab King. I definitely think he's one of the simpler Doom Tower bosses to find a solution for. It may be a bit frustrating if you go several weeks without winning a CVC, or when you do win a CVC, you don't get rings on the champions that you need. But for at least the low level stages of Doom Tower, you can bring in almost any 5 champions. So really, even like I said before, you could probably do it with 3 champions. So all you really need is to find a couple of Blood Shield rings, get them on some champions, or find a champion that has an A1 that applies a shield to himself like Admonitor, and then mix that in with your Blood Shield ring wearing champions, and that should be enough to get you through those early Scarab boss floors. Oh, one last thing to mention here. It's actually really important. I'm sorry I waited for the end of the video. I hope most people have watched this all the way to this point. You cannot use Phantom Touch on any of your champions, or the Blood Shield ring won't work. Okay, so Phantom Touch, for whatever reason, applies damage as an extra hit, and that extra hit will always be counted. So you can't use Phantom Touch against Scarab King if you're using the Blood Shield rings. Okay, so let me know in the comments below, do you use this Blood Shield ring strategy, or do you have another way to beat the boss? Maybe you have one of the solo champions and you prefer to use that. That is it for me today. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and consider joining our Discord community. I've been Cole Red, and I will see you in another video soon.